Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Learn to Sew with Noni and I'm your friend Noni. Today I bring us another exciting tutorial on how to make a strapless tube top. Now your tube can be strapless or with straps. Okay, you can just make tiny straps and attach it like a spaghetti kind of hand or sleeve for your tube. So it depends on what you want to make. All right, so today would be making a strapless tube top. Okay, now for your tube you could also just make it to the half length and add it to a pencil skirt or a peplum, whatever it is you want to make, or you just want to make it as a tube to wear a jacket on it. So for this tutorial today I have my basic block, the front and the back pattern. Okay, so if you do not know how to create the basic block, please comment in the comment section and I will get us updated on how to create the basic block. Now for the measurements, I'll be using shoulder 14, bust 33, waist 27, under bust circumference 25, bust point 10, under bust length 13.5, bust span 7, and the top length of 19 inches. Now for your tube, if you want to rock it with the jacket, it means that the tube is not going to be so long, just somewhere around the navel or something, and anywhere you want the length to be. Now the bust span is 7 inches divided by 2 give us 3.5. Okay, so that is what we'll be using for the dart placement. All right, so from the center front I'll place 3.5. Now initially in my previous videos I always talk about adding an extra half-inch seam allowance to it. Now this is a pattern that I'll be using to create the dress, so we'll just make it directly on the pattern, then on the fabric we would add our seam allowances, our allowance for joining the dart. Now that's the chest line, the bust point, the under bust and the half length. Now I'll mark 3.5 inches, which is my bust span divided by 2 on the bust point, the under bust and on the half length, and connect into a straight line. Okay, so then from the bust point I'm going to come down by 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch depending on how big the bust is. So I'm working with bust 33, so I'm just coming down by 3/4 of an inch. Now that brings us to what I call the under bust curve, and if you follow my channel you'll be conversant with this. From bust 32 to 35 we use 1.5, 36 to 41 we use 2 inches. Now I'm working with bust 33, so it means it falls from between 32 to 35, so I'll be using 1.5 inches as my under bust curve. Now for the under bust dart intake, because I'm using 1.5, I'm going to be dividing that by 2 to give me 0.75 on both sides of my dart line. Okay, so 0.75 inches on the left and 0.75 inches on the right. So whatever you have as the under bust curve, you're going to be dividing that by 2 and share it equally on both sides of the bust pan line. Right, so having done that, I'll also do the same thing on the half length or on the waistline. Whatever you mark on the bust line, on the under bust, you mark the same thing on the half length or on the waistline. All right, so connect that into a straight line and connect the other into a straight line. Now the next thing is to connect in a curving manner to the bust point, to the 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch you came down from the bust point, and that is to create the curve for the under bust. Okay, remember it's called the under bust curve and it's supposed to be in a curvy manner because the bust is not pointy, it's curvy. All right, so having done that, the next thing to do is to take the shoulder width. I'm going to measure what I have from my neck width to my shoulder, and I have 4 inches there. So half of 4 is 2 inches, so I'm just going to make a mark at 2 inches there and connect it directly to the bust point. Okay, so take the line from the middle of your shoulder to your bust point directly. All right, so now the next thing to do is to take the bust radius. Now the bust radius is the distance from the bust point to the under bust. Okay, so I'm going to measure what I have from the bust point to the under bust, and I have 3.5 inches. Remember I said it is called the bust radius and it's the distance from the bust point to the under bust. Now I'm going to mark 3.5 inches from the bust point round the pattern. okay, round that bust point area. I'm just going to be making a mark at 3.5 inches, and I'll be rotating my tape because I want to mark 3.5 inches round starting from the underbust. Now if you have a protractor, you could use your protractor to do that. I remember my elementary mathematics, yeah, protractor. You can place it on directly on your bust point, then place it on 3.5 inches, then take it round to get a circle. All right, so because I don't have that now, and I think it's also easier to just use my tape to measure 3.5 inches round, starting from the under bust, that point from the bust pan line on the bust point. Bust pan line on the bust point. I want us to get it right. The bust pan line on the bust point. So you're rotating it round 3.5 inches round. Now, this 3.5 inches is not synonymous to anybody. It is your bust span, the bust span, the nipple to nipple measurement, the breast distance, or whatever you call it. Now, I've made those dotted lines, so I'm just going to take my marker to highlight it into a full circle. I'm just following the dotted lines, to connect the point. So you want to do the stroke gently, you want to stroke it gently just so that you have your perfect circle. Like I said, you could use your compass. Is it the compass or the protractor? Oh god, I can't remember. Okay, so having gotten your circle, you now have to take the upper chest and it's for your bust tightening, okay, the upper bust tightening. Okay, so whatever you have as a dart intake on the bust, on the under bust, you're going to be taking the same thing on the upper chest. So we took 0.75 on both sides of the under bust, so we're taking the same thing here. It's just to tighten the upper bust so that your tube is not gaping at the top. Okay, so you just want to take a dart there so that it fits perfectly. All right, so now the next thing is to measure your neck depth, whatever you want as a neck depth. Okay, so you could just come down by maybe 7 or 7.5, depending on what you want. If you want to show your cleavage, okay, if you want to show your cleavage, so I'm coming down by 7 inches thereabout and connect it to the top of that circle we have there. Now it has created the sweetheart neckline for us. Now for your tube, it's always synonymous to tubes to have a sweetheart neckline, so you might want to go with a sweetheart neckline. All right, so after that, you would also shaping it to the armhole. Take it on a curve down to the armhole. Okay, so remember I took 0.75 on both sides. I also took the same thing. I want to write it down just so that I highlight that so we get to know what we're working with. All right, so I'm going to replace that. Okay, so on the sides I'm adding 1.5 inches. 0.75 on both sides gave us 1.5 inches. That was our under bust curve. So I'm replacing the 1.5 inches on the chest line and on the half length. Okay, so this is my dart replacement. The dart replacement. This is not our side seam allowance yet. This is just to replace the dart you're going to be cutting out, just so that you don't have a deficit on your pattern. Okay, now the next thing is to add your side seam allowance. Now for a tube, you don't need too much allowance, so I'll be adding 1 inch. But if this would be your first time of making a tube, or you're making it for your clients, and you know how clients can be frustrating, they want to loosen the fabric, the dress, whenever they feel they've gotten bigger or something, so you can decide to add up to 1.5 or 2 inches depending on what you want. Now we'll connect that after taking in that replacement and your dart allowance. So you're going to curve to your armhole. Now the tube stops directly on the armhole. Okay, so you're just going to connect it on a curve down to the circle already. Okay, so depending on what you want, you can decide to come in lower if you want. The first curve is enough if that's what you want, or you can place it lower depending on how you want to create the pattern. Okay, so I've made a mess around there. Just connect that. Now for your neck depth, you could also make it deeper if you want to show your cleavage. Oh, you want to, be chic, you can always do that. So now I would cut. Now before that, I also want to add seam allowance, okay? Because you're going to be turning the top part with your lining, so you're going to be adding seam allowance to that part, so that by the time you join with your lining, you have your accurate measurement, what you want as the measurement, okay? So I added 1/2 inch to the top, so that by the time we turn with our lining, we'll still have what we need for our tube. All right, so I hope I've not confused you around there. It's super easy, just add 1/2 inch to the top. All right, so now this top part would be your yoke. If you want to add a yoke to this tube, or you're making a dress or a top that you want a yoke, so this is the yoke. You could use your net to cut the yoke. You could use your lace, your tool, whatever you want to use as the yoke. So if you want to make a yoke, this is how to cut out the yoke. You just follow the armhole shape and the neckline shape. Okay, now you can also alter the neckline. You could make it lower, you can make it higher, whatever you want, and also take out your shoulder slope. All right, so this is your yoke. Okay, so this is going to be the yoke for your dress, for your tube, sorry. So if you want to add a yoke to this, you could actually add the yoke, but this is a strapless tube top, so it's not going to have a yoke. Now if you want to add a yoke, remember we took away 1/2 inch, okay, from it. We added 1/2 inch to the top for joining with your lining. Remember this 1/2 inch up here now, okay? So we're going to replace that 1 inch, then we would add 1 inch. That means the 1/2 inch you took out from the top, and another 1/2 inch that will be used to join your yoke to your dress, and that'll be 1 inch. Okay, so you just add 1 inch to your yoke. I just had to do that on a different piece of paper if you want a yoke. All right, so now the next thing to do is to cut through. Now you extend that leg up to that seam allowance, okay, just so that you cut everything alongside each other. So I'm cutting out the darts. Okay, so cutting through, and you want to cut in a curving manner. You can see the way I'm curving my hand, because that's the region around the bust, and you don't want it to be pointy. Okay, so for the other side, you also cut. Okay, you cut gently because you don't want to have a pointy edge around that point, so you want to make sure you're carving out the points. All right, so this is the pattern for the front. Okay, this is the pattern for the front. Then you're just going to be placing on your fabric and you cut. So I'll show us how you also cut on your fabric. Now the next thing to do is to cut out your back. Now for the back, I already have my basic bodice block and my zip allowance of 1 inch inclusive. So what I will just do is to take in my dart, and I did that by marking my bust span divided by 2. That gave me 3.5, and I marked that on the bust point and also connected it to the length of my top. Then I'll take a dart of 1/2 inch on both sides of the bust span line, then connect that back to the bust point. Yes, okay, connect the 2 dart legs to the bust point. Okay, now the next thing for you to do is to determine how low you want the neckline to be. Okay, so remember that the top for the front, the tube from the front stops at the chest line, so you want to make sure you have exactly the same thing along the side. Now for the neck depth, you can come down by 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inches, depending on how low you want it. Remember, that's our zip allowance there, so you extend it to the zip allowance, then connect it in a curving manner to the chest line. the front terminated around the chest line, so you want to make sure that it's the same for the back, and they'll be meeting up at the side. Okay, so your neckline could be low, just from the chest line down to however low you want it. Now for the zip area, I want to also tighten the zip area so that it's not bulging out. So on the half length, you come in by 1 inch. Okay, on the top length, you come in by 1 inch and connect it directly to the chest line. Okay, so this is to eliminate back puff. All right, this is to eliminate back puff. Now after that, down the other line serves as your 1 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to connect from the top of the zip allowance to where the other zip allowance on the waistline ended. Okay, it's easy, it's so easy, as easy as that. All right, so that is now my new zip allowance. I had to use a different color of pen to differentiate it from the other zip allowance. So this is the new zip allowance. All right, so on your half length, having done this, remember we came in by the waistline by 1 inch for that zip space, so we are replacing that 1 inch, because if you don't do that, you're going to be having a shortage and your pattern won't be fit again. So remember we took a dart intake of 1 inch, that's half inch on both sides, so we're replacing the dart. Okay, then your side seam allowance, we used 1 inch for the front, so we're using the same 1 inch for the back. Okay, so this is the zip replacement, this is the dart replacement, and that is the seam allowance. Okay, now to the top part, we're also going to be adding our 1 inch side seam allowance. We're not cutting out anything there is no dart around that part, so it's just your 1 inch seam allowance. Then you connect it down to the hem. Okay, so you connect it down to the hem, and that's basically it for your tube. You just want to then add your 1/2 inch seam allowance just like we did to the front, so that by the time you turn with your lining, you also get what you want initially. Okay, so you take it up and add your 1/2 inch seam allowance, then you extend the dart line up. Correct, and that is it. It's super easy, guys, it's so easy. Okay, so we're just going to cut that out, and that'll be it. So make sure you cut, add your seam allowance, very important. Okay, you could also do this on your fabric, you can add it on your fabric, but it's easy to forget, so I like to make sure I cut that out on my pattern first before transferring to my fabric. Okay, so I would also cut around that zipper side, so the other part is going off, and we now have a slanted zipper allowance. Now the reason for this is because the human back is not straight across the spine, it's a bit slanted. Okay, it's not straight, so if you make it straight, you're going to be having a bulge at the back. All right, so I also cut through my dart. For your tube, I don't like to sew the dart, I like to cut it out and drawing it back. It gives you a very clean finish. So that's the center back and the side back. You also want to note this because it's easy to mix this pattern up and you wouldn't know where the side is and where the center is, so you would want to make a mark there, and so that you can differentiate it, because by the time you cut, it might be difficult to know which is which. All right, so you cut your dart. You could just sew your dart if you want, but for a professional finishing, I like to cut out my dart so that by the time I sew and iron, everything is looking so sweet. All right, guys, so that is it. That's my center back and my side back. All right, so if you also want to add a yoke to it, you can. Now on my fabric, I'll just add 1/2 inch to join the center back and the side back. Just add 1/2 inch to it. Okay, when I'm marking on my fabric. Okay, for the front, I'll also do the same thing. Okay, I would add 1/2 inch to the side there and another 1/2 inch to the other side. Okay, that is the only thing I'll be adding on my fabric, okay, aside this pattern. All right, so now for the back yoke, if you want to add a yoke to it, this is the back yoke. you want to add a yoke to it. So you just cut through the armhole. Okay, just cut through the armhole, the shoulder slope, and your neckline, and that would serve as the yoke for the back, assuming we want to add a yoke. Okay, I'm explaining all of those things in case you want to add a yoke to yours. You know, you could always do what you want. If you're not comfortable with wearing your tube strapless, you could add a yoke to it, or you could add a tiny strap to it. So that'll be it. I'll be transferring to my fabric now. Okay, so on the fabric, I've placed the patterns on the fabric and I have cut them out. Okay, so this is the center front and it's on fold, and that's my lining too. The lining is on fold. You can see the main fabric is also on fold, and that is my pattern. So if you notice, I added ½ inch for joining. Okay, so you can see the ½ inch seam allowance I added to the side for joining. Okay, so I want to also indicate this is the center front and this is the side front. So I added ½ inch to the sides. Also to the side front, I also added ½ inch to the side. Okay, so you can see, then I also cut my lining, 2 pieces for the lining and 2 pieces for the main fabric. This is 2 pieces for the main fabric, 2 pieces for the lining. Okay, so this is how you should cut yours. For the center back, I also did the same thing, my ½ inch joining allowance. Okay, the same thing on the side back. So I have my side back already cut out, 2 pieces for the lining. Remember my side seam allowance, the ½ inch for joining. Then I have 2 pieces for the back and 2 pieces for the lining. The same thing to the other part, 2 pieces for the main fabric, 2 pieces for the lining. Okay, so I'll just show us a little sewing tip. I'm going to take out the pattern. Okay, so place it back on my lining because it can be really confusing, so I need to place my pattern on it to know which is which. Okay, so take out your pins, take out your main fabric and place the pattern back on the lining. So I would explain what to do on the fabric, then you'd also do the same thing to the lining. Okay, so for the front, I open up my fabric, for the front, then take 1 piece for the side front and attach it to the side. So this is how it's going to be, the 3 sides for the front. So the side would meet the center front, and remember the seam allowance of ½ inch we added, we use it to join the sides. Now you could decide to pad your tube top. Okay, if you want to wear it with a bra, you can decide not to pad. So I'm not going to be padding because the person is just going to wear a bra inside and wear the tube. But if you don't want to be wearing this tube with a bra, you can pad it with your wadding, your breast pad, and any type of breast pad that you use. So the same thing you did for the front, you did the same thing to the lining. Then to the center back, I also take out the pattern so that would get to the center back. So I'll just place the pattern on the lining piece. Okay, just so it doesn't scatter and confuse you. Okay, so if you're making this for the first time, you want to do this exactly the way I'm doing it. Once you take out the main fabric, you just place the lining back on it so that you don't scatter it. The markings, we did it on the pattern. There are no markings on the fabric. Okay, so you can also use your chalk to make the markings on your fabric. Okay, so I want to use the pattern to find out which is which for the center back or how it's placed, because that can be really confusing. So that's why you need to keep your pattern around you so that you can be placing it to know which is which. All right, so on the center back, okay, I want to make that mark. Now I'm using marker because this is a tutorial. Please, on your own, use your chalk. Now to the sides I'll join, I'm just making just a little X mark, just a mark there to know that that's the side where it should be joined. Okay, so that's what I've just done. So I also want to write the center back there, just indicate that that's the center back. I used a marker, but please, my knees are on the floor. Please use a chalk. I'm doing this because the chalk might not be visible enough for us to see. That's why I used my marker, and this is a tutorial. Okay, please don't cause problem for you and your customer and use a marker pen on the fabric. Okay, all right, I love you. All right, so I'll join the sides together for the back. Okay, place them accordingly. The part that you made that X mark should match up with the other part that you made the X mark. Okay, so just join by 1/2 inch. So it's important to know which is which. Okay, so for this other side, remember, you'd match it up. Make sure that it's the marked point, and you're joining right side facing right side. Okay, right side facing right side, and you would join that. Make sure that you are joining it accurately. Don't go and join it upside down. Okay, so I'll do the same thing to my lining piece. Then I'll go to my sewing machine and join exactly as I've shown you. Then I'll show us the next step to take. All right, guys, so welcome back. And this is past midnight, so the video might be a bit blurry. Okay, so just bear with me. I'm just trying to make sure I finish up this video today. All right, so I've joined the sides for the front, and I ironed it properly just so that everything is laying perfectly. You can see, and by the time I place it, you can see that the curved part of the bust area is prominent enough. But if you want it to be very curved, you can pad that with your wadding or your breast pad. All right, guys, so I've also joined the sides for the back. Okay, so I've joined the pieces for the back. You can see, so when you join them, you make sure you iron this, so you can see you open up your stitches with your iron. Okay, make sure you open up your stitches. My fabric is rumpled, and I'll iron that properly when I'm done. All right, so the same thing I did to the lining. Okay, I attached the sides for the lining. Just whatever you're doing to the fabric, it's the same thing you're doing to the lining. And we're sewing lining separately and fabric separately because we want to achieve a very clean finish. Now to the lining for the front, I've also joined the sides, so you can see. So that's the main fabric itself and the lining. So you make sure you join everything together and iron the seam line. All right, so to the front, you're just going to place it the right side facing you. Then you place the lining on it. So the right side of the fabric is going to be facing the right side of the lining, and you pin it together at the top. You make sure you pin the center point where you have that sweetheart neckline so that it matches up with that of the lining. Then you also attach the sides, then sew with 1/2 inch. Okay, remember while we were drafting the pattern, we added 1/2 inch for the upper part. So you just place it together and sew with 1/2 inch. All right, so I'll do that off camera because I don't want this video to get longer than it is already. Now to the back, I would also do the same thing. Get your back pattern, open it up. Okay, make sure that the zipper sides are facing each other. Okay, then you get the lining for each side of it, place it right sides facing right sides. Then you're going to be joining the top with 1/2 inch all the way. Then down to the zipper area, you also join that by 1/2 inch. Remember, we are aiming to achieve a clean finish, so you want the zipper area to be cleanly finished. The same thing to this other side. Join the top by 1/2 inch and the zipper side by 1/2 inch. You're not touching the sides for this. All right, so I'll just go and do that quickly off camera and I'll be back. All right, guys, so I'm done sewing that, the front and the back, and I've ironed it properly so that everything is properly aligned. Then after stitching that upper part, you make sure you notch round it. You can see my notches. Make sure you notch round it and properly ironing. Use a very hot iron, not hot enough to burn your fabric, but hot enough to straighten all the sewn parts. The same thing to the back, and I've notched, as you can see my notch. Then you can see the zipper area is also clean. I've cleaned that part up, and the same thing for the other side. All right, so now the next thing to do is to sew the sides. Now regularly you just place the front on the back, and take in your measurements, take the seam allowance you left. But now we want to achieve a clean finishing, so what we'll be doing is to just place the front on the back, then take out the line. We want to sew fabric to fabric and lining to lining. So on the top part where you sewed, you have to match it up together. Make sure that it's matching, because you don't want to have an excess around that point. So you are pulling so that you have your fabric to fabric and lining to lining. Around that part, you make sure you merge it up and hold it down with your pin so it doesn't move around. Okay, so you're pulling the fabric to fabric and lining to lining. So this is the fabric, the side for the front and the side for the back. I am pulling them separately, and I'm exaggerating on fabric to fabric, lining to lining, to achieve a clean finish. So this is the lining, okay, the two lining parts for the front and the back. Okay, so remember the seam allowance we left was 1 inch, so you could measure to be sure, but I'm sure of what I did, so I'm just going to take 1 inch all round from the lining down to the fabric. Remember, fabric to fabric, lining to lining. So on the lining part, you're just sewing 1 inch and run it across down to the main fabric with 1 inch. The same thing to the other side. Pin the center together so that it's properly aligned. Then you pull the fabric together and the lining together. Remember, it's fabric to fabric and lining to lining. Okay, so I'm just going to sew that and come back and show us. All right, so I'm done stitching that, and I used 1 inch. That was the same allowance I give when we were drafting the pattern. So you can see the sides for the front, it's super clean. It is so clean. Then when I turn to the back, it's so clean, like you're not seeing any rough stitch line. Everything was done inside. So that is why, and that is how we achieve a clean finishing. So you can try it for other outfits you're making to get a clean finishing. So the next thing would be to attach this to your peplum, to your pencil skirt, whatever it is you're making with 1/2 inch. But if you're just making a tube top, we're just going to take it inside and clean up the inside. So for now, ironing is very important. Now this is a low watt iron, is a generator iron, and I'm working with generator now. Okay, so NEPA failed me, so I had to continue the video, so I had to turn on the generator. So this iron is super nice. You could even use it for the smallest generator called I Pass My Neighbor in Nigeria. So I got it for 3,500 naira from Kechi's sewing machine on Instagram and on Facebook. Her Facebook page is Kechi's sewing machines on Facebook and Instagram. So you go check her out. She has low watt irons for sale, and they're really affordable. All right, so I'm not paid for this ad anyways, but I enjoyed the products, and that is why I'm saying this. So you make sure you iron properly. Okay, make sure you iron properly and everything is in place. All right, so you just make sure you iron properly. Like I've said, it's so cool to iron as you sew. It makes your work so clean, gives you a professional finishing. And I can't overemphasize the importance of ironing while you're making your dress. Like, you iron every step of the way. It can be stressful, but then it's worth it. Okay, so I'm done with that. So the next thing I would do now is to clean up the inside. Okay, so I don't want to attach this to a peplum. I don't want to attach it to a skirt. I don't want to turn it into a gown. I just want it to be a tube top. So what I would do is just to clean up the inside. So I'm going to turn it back on the inside, you can see, then match up the fabric and the lining. Okay, making sure that all my points are matching, you can see. So I'm going to sew it on 1/2 inch all the way down to the top, then leaving about 2 inches to the side so that I can turn it all out. Okay, so I'm just going to start sewing. All right, just sew on 1/2 inch all the way down, all the way to the lower part. Okay, so we'll just start sewing. So I'm done stitching the lower part. I had to do that off camera because I don't want this video to get too long. It's already long. All right, so I'll just trim off the excess thread on the fabric. So you can see I joined with 1/2 inch all the way to the edge. Then I left about 2 inches so that I can turn everything all out from there. Okay, so that's the opening for where I would turn out from. So I'm turning it out now, just pulling everything inside so that I can pull it to the right side. All right, so you just pull. All right, I really enjoyed making this tube top. It's super easy. Like, you can make it within 40 to 50 minutes. That's too long anyways. Once you cut out your pattern, you can just sew it really fast. Okay, so I'm turning out everything to make sure it's properly aligned. Make sure that everything is out, so you can now come in with your iron and give it a very good press so that everything would relax. Okay, very important. You turn out everywhere, plug in your iron, give it a good press. Okay, then the lower part, sorry, where we have that 2 inches for turning, you can just place it on fold, just fold it inside. Okay, then you can top stitch on it using a matching thread. You can top stitch, or you use your needle and thread to just make an invisible stitch. Use your needle and thread, make an invisible stitch around that part. Then you go and iron. The next thing to do would be to fix your zipper, and voila, you're done. So this is a very long zipper I have here, so I wouldn't fix the zipper now. I'll just get a short zip and attach to it. So that is the end of my tube top, and it was super easy to make and it looks really nice. I'll go iron it to make it beautiful. All right, so this is it, guys. This is my tube top. Super easy, so beautiful. If you found this video helpful, guys, give me a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I love you. Bye.